Hello and welcome back to Jack Chaucer, Storyteller. Again, we're Nikki White, Polar Extremes is the book we're reading. And Chapter 5, Second Chance, is our story today. And this is from Nikki's point of view. It's set December 24th, 2019. This is the last flashback chapter before we go back to the time frame of the very first chapter. So this is the last look back before we move forward again. And this is set in Cape Town, South Africa. The bridge hid me away in a windowless room inside a motionless flying saucer for more than 4 months. That's 1/3 of my 23rd year spent in solitary confinement for insubordination, attempted breach of contract, and enlisting my father's help to escape from South Miami Hospital. The tiny room where I briefly reunited with Bill became my cell, which was nothing more than a bed and 4 walls. The small window where Virgil had observed us disappeared behind an automatic compartment. They buzzed me out 3 times a day to go into an adjacent room, where an awful meal awaited me on a small table next to an uncomfortable chair. These also were the only times I was allowed to use the bathroom, located in one corner of the adjacent room. I was allowed only 2 showers per week. A red digital countdown clock on the wall told me how much time I had in the meal room before I needed to get back to my cell. I always made it under the 30-minute limit. I didn't want to find out what the next worst punishment would be after solitary confinement. I literally never saw anyone. They only opened and closed the door between the 2 rooms by remote buzzer. Bare essentials, an occasional change of clothes, toiletries, and one new book every week were left for me in the meal room. The books ranged in topics from astronomy to physics to botany, but the one I enjoyed most was A Case for Mars by Robert Zubrin. It helped give me a sense of purpose for all of the bullshit I was going through. The gist of the book was we landed on the moon in 1969, yet here it is all these decades later, and we still haven't set foot on Mars. Sure, we've sent some rovers there, but we've wasted a lot of time not picking up the torch that was handed to us by a better, more gutsy generation. Zubrin really blasted some of our U.S. presidents and NASA leaders for not putting enough money and commitment toward colonizing Mars. So when I wasn't falling asleep and having nightmares about, quote, the police, unquote, stopping my father in the middle of the night on a highway in northern Florida or southern Georgia, I actually fantasized about being part of that first colony on Mars. I could not deny that a part of me still wanted to go, regardless of the horrible company that planned to get me there. I thought about how ridiculously bizarre it would be for someone like me to reach Mars while the US and NASA were still dawdling. What if I did go through the training, the rocket did get off the ground, and I did survive months and months in space? What if we didn't burn up entering the thin Martian atmosphere and actually did touch down on the red clay? I'd be the Nellie Armstrong of the 21st century. Of course I was delirious. These mirages toyed with me for weeks and weeks as I waited for the end of 2019 to come. Then, at last, my cell door opened. What little hope I had was steamrolled immediately by the sight of David Michael, my #1 tormentor and the leader of the bridge on Earth as soon as Peter departs to lead the bridge on Mars. He just stood there in his perfect navy blue suit for a moment and burned me with his stare. I had started to sit up when the door opened, but he wasn't worth the effort, so I slumped back down into a lying position on the bed. Nicole, get up, the short, stout man said sharply. I just rolled my eyes. Join me for breakfast, he quickly added, hooking his thumb toward the meal room. I bit my tongue and got up. A little too fast, however. I nearly blacked out, but David grabbed my arms and steadied me with his vice-like grip. My hand still hurts at the thought of our first handshake in 2018, when I was an intern news reporter covering a bridge groundbreaking. I recoiled from him as quickly as I could. We sized each other up for a second, and then he waved me toward breakfast. The tiny table had 2 chairs set up across from each other. At least his was the same kind of uncomfortable chair I had. This meal actually smelled edible, so I slowly submitted to a breakfast date with David. It wasn't like I had much of a choice. I just focused on the real eggs, bacon, toast, and jelly, home-fried potatoes, and hot coffee. I didn't ask for permission to start eating, and David, thankfully, didn't try to start a conversation right away. He began eating and sipping his coffee, too. I also noticed the countdown clock on the wall didn't flash any red numbers. Apparently, there was no time limit for the first time in months, but that didn't mean I ate any more slowly. If it weren't for David sitting across from me, this would have been the best meal of my life. That's how good it tasted compared to the crap they had been feeding me since August. Today is Christmas Eve, David suddenly announced as I nearly finished my breakfast. I had no idea what day it was. I had stopped trying to figure that out months ago. 1 year ago today, I called to congratulate you for committing to a full bridge interplanetary membership with our company. He continued. Do you recall that conversation? I nodded and sipped my coffee, suddenly wondering why I hadn't already doused David with the hot liquid. Clearly, he had distracted me with the gourmet breakfast. I told you we had high hopes for you, and there was a 99% chance we'd select you for a Mars mission. Do you recall that? He asked. I nodded again. And I said only you could screw that up. The other 1% rested in your hands. Do you remember? I nodded a third time, playing along with his stupid lecture. At least the breakfast was worth enduring whatever bullshit he had to say. You ditched Virgil in Fort Lauderdale after agreeing to my face not to go see Bill, he said. You filed only one report for our network during the hurricane and concluded that with a shameful, slanderous, and inaccurate rant about the company that had hired you. When Virgil ordered you to fulfill your Director of Information obligations during Bill's ex-wife's visit to your hospital room, you failed to do your job yet again, and then colluded with your father to escape in the middle of the night. We just stared at each other, neither blinking. Does that sound like a person who has lived up to her 1% of the deal? He asked. Our stare down continued. I thought about the times he had used me like a stage prop during his grand speeches at the two bridge galas. I truly hated David, probably more than Virgil and Peter, though it was a close three-way race. But I also wanted to see the sky again, and breathe fresh air again, and maybe at least see my father again, if not Bill and Adam and Max. No, I finally said, still meeting his stare. I let my emotions take over, and I failed to live up to what I had agreed to do, what I had been paid well to do. I see that now, and I'm sorry. David nodded. Is that how you really feel, or are you just telling me what I want to hear? This is not easy for me to talk about, given all that has happened since, I said bitterly before softening slightly. But I can look at the situation from your perspective, the bridge's perspective, and see how I screwed you over. Then perhaps your time in solitary has not been a waste. I view the sum of your transgressions as one giant mistake, a byproduct of youth and romantic inclinations. We at the bridge do believe in second chances. We still believe you are capable of great things. We already unveiled you as one of the extremely lucky few who has been chosen to go to Mars and start a colony there. Do you still want to go to Mars? I decided to compartmentalize my answer, which was yes, just not on a mission led by this shady criminal cult. Of course I do, I said. His haughty brown eyes probed my face for a moment. With us? He asked. I got creative. You're the only company that can get me there. He smiled. That's actually not true. The Dutch Mars One project has moved up its manned launch to September 7, 2022. My eyebrows shot skyward. But we just successfully tested a new thruster last month, David continued. We're planning our launch for October 28, 2021, with an arrival on Mars on August 24, 2022. My heartbeat picked up speed and not from the coffee. We want to get there first, he said, with a tone that left no room to argue. I did anyway. But what about what Judith said? I countered, referring to mission specialist Judith Feld's warning during our TV panel discussion in February that going too soon would be a mistake. She made it sound like even 2025 would be too soon, too dangerous. Well, that was then, this is now, David said firmly. There are many variables, all of which can change on a daily, weekly, and monthly basis, especially as new technology and resources become available. Judith was named to our mission, I pointed out. Is she still going? No. So she's against it? Yes. Wow, was my reply. I finished off what was left of my coffee and shook my head. What are my options, if any? You could begin training on New Year's Day for an October 2021 launch from the half-built Mission Center just north of here. Or You can continue to remain in solitary until you feel you are ready to train for a later mission, he said. The next training window begins on January 1st, 2021. I exhaled while trying to remain as stoic as possible. So train now or rot in here for another year, or nothing, he said, shaking his thick necklace head. You go to Mars sooner or you go later. Either way, you'll stay here until you figure out what living up to your end of a commitment means. That could take a week, a year, or the rest of your life. You decide. I refused to cry in front of him. I would not give him the satisfaction. I just had to get out of solitary as soon as possible, so the decision was easy. I'll begin training on New Year's Day then, I said. Good, he said, immediately standing up from his chair and extending his hand. I stood up and reluctantly shook it, and he crushed my hand as usual. I tried not to flinch. I figured I better get used to pain, and God knows what else, with training looming and Mars somehow in my future. Don't fail us again, Nicole, he warned. You've got one more week in here to get your head on straight for the amazing second opportunity you've been given. Make the most of it. Your meals over the next week will be far more appetizing and designed to start getting you back to full strength. Your commitment will be tested early and often during your training. Do well and you will help improve the situations for the people you care about. Bill, Roger, Adam, and Max, while also improving your own situation. We are all connected through the bridge, just as one day in 2022, the bridge will connect the human race on Earth to a new one on Mars. You are and always will be part of the bridge, or you will be nothing to no one. Do you fully understand this conversation and what is required of you this time? Slowly I nodded. His relentless eyes clearly wanted a verbal response. Yes, I do, I said. I shook on it, and I mean it. Welcome back, then, and Merry Christmas, he said before buzzing himself through the door. That's a good one. So the next chapter is Chapter 6, Root Beer Lolly, also from Nikki's point of view, and we go back to January 1st, 2020, off the coast of South Africa, near Dyer Island, right after she was pulled back on the boat, escaping the sharks. So we'll see you again next time.